Oh yes, it's Cam Rants number 7. Yeah, I'm continuing these videos. And I've got a read-along video today. It's going to be a longer Cam Rants. This one is on IGN, the #1 most brown-nosing internet website since, I don't know, TMZ. They'll brown-nose anyone. Right now they've been brown-nosing Disney. I think their head's so far up Bob Iger's ass it's coming out his mouth. So, without further ado, let's do this. This article is called Between the Panels: How to Avoid Past Star Wars EU Mistakes. And this is by Jesse Sheeden. And so now I have a person to blame for this piece of shit article. I'm going to link this article in the description below, and you can click on it and read along yourself when you get tired of me reading out loud, because I'm not the best at reading out loud. So, let's get into this. One of the great things about Star Wars is that it's become so much bigger than just the movies. There are countless novels, comics, and games that comprise the expanded universe. Star Wars: The Clone Wars and its successors, Star Wars Rebels, has done a great job of growing the universe on the small screen. And with Disney's purchase of the franchise and the establishment of the Lucasfilm Story Group, there already was one. It was called the Holocron, dumbass. Immediately, I'm already picking it apart. There's no longer a need for the term expanded universe. Oh, Jesus, it's one of these. Everything going forward, the film sequels, the TV shows, the novels and comics, it's all part of one Disney-approved whole. Like the expanded universe wasn't approved by George Lucas, he didn't have to sign off on everything made in the expanded universe. Check your fucking facts. Where was I? However, as Disney sets about building their unified Star Wars universe, they need to take care to avoid mistakes of the old expanded universe. Oh, do tell what mistakes were made in the expanded universe. And granted, there are some. There's things I don't like in the EU, but it's outweighed by the things I love. The EU has had a rocky history at best. Really? Since when? It was a great thing to have in the early 90s when the excitement of the original trilogy had faded and no one was sure of if the rumors about the Star Wars prequels would ever pan out. Now they just skipped Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the Han Solo Adventures trilogy, the Lando Calrissian Adventures, the Marvel Star Wars comic. Those all branched out from like 1978 to the mid-80s. Oh, they also forgot the Ewoks movies that were in the late 80s. The Ewoks cartoon that was in the 80s, and the Droids cartoon that was in the 80s, and all the West End game stuff that continued into the 90s. But nah, that's not important. We're gonna go to the 90s. Novels like Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy and Dark Horse's Dark Empire comics renewed interest in the franchise and offered fans of the first glimpse of a Star Wars universe after the collapse of the Empire. Very true, it did. I don't have a problem with that. It did. Most people have read the Thrawn books if they've read any Star Wars EU. And many comic book fans, especially ones from the 90s, did read the Dark Empire trilogy. It was one of the first. But after a few years, the EU started to grow stagnant. It seemed like every new novel revolved around another Imperial warlord coming out of hiding to battle the fledgling New Republic, and/or Luke slowly building his Jedi Academy. Yes, the Bantam books became cliches of themselves. There's a lot of super weapon of mass destruction that the Empire's trying to use to gain a hold of the New Republic. Luke couldn't use his Jedi powers because of blah 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 Deus Ex Machina thing. And yeah, but there was so much good, and everything pans out once you get to New Jedi Order. Stuff makes sense because that's how the EU worked. Everything connects. As for the comics, aside from the occasional gem like Crimson Empire, little stands out in the late 90s era. What happened to Rogue Squadron, or if we're talking really late 90s, what about Tales of the Jedi, which created the Old Republic? You know the thing that led to the video game and to the MMO, the big deal that lots of gamers love, came from Tales of the Jedi, which came out, I want to say, before or during Episode 1. It was there. Things changed when the prequels began hitting theaters and George Lucas finally opened the floodgates on the saga of Anakin Skywalker and the Clone Wars. Very true, it did. There was the Star Wars Republic run took place, which went a little bit before Episode 1, between Episodes 1 and 2, and then Episodes 2 and 3. And they kind of wrapped up right around, really near the end of Episode 3. So very true. There's all sorts of Clone Wars shit. But most of us remember that. The books and comics responded in kind. Del Rey... what the fuck? I don't know. Del Rey took over the novels and kicked off the epic and lengthy New Jedi Order crossover. Very true. If you trudge through the Bantam books, and granted people like the Bantam books, I like some of the Bantam books, New Jedi Order is it's a very different series of Star Wars books. Check it out. This is coming from a guy who only read the first one, but knows a lot of people who read through the whole thing, so, check it out. I'm planning on going through all of them. Dark Horse grew more ambitious with their comic book projects, as well as providing readers with an in-depth look at the Clone Wars conflict long before Star Wars on TV became a thing. Not entirely true. People like to forget the micro-series of Clone Wars. The one by the creators of Samurai Jack. It's the one that actually is done the best. It won all sorts of TV awards. People like to forget that because of Dave Filoni's schlock. And yes, Dave Filoni stuff is schlock. That's just my opinion, though. So, Even the games stepped up in a big way. Many consider the first Knights of the Old Republic game to be one of the best Star Wars projects in any medium. Well, I disagree with this. Yes, it did step up, but it was already stepping up in the 90s with the Shadows of the Empire video game, which proved that you could make a good Star Wars story and adapt it to a video game, and it didn't have to revolve around the movies. So that statement's, I guess, kind of true. KOTOR is considered one of the best RPGs of all time, at least for the 2000s. It's considered one of the best Star Wars games, that and Battlefront. But yeah. Here we go into the shit territory. But even though the expanded universe got bigger in the aftermath of the prequel trilogy, it didn't necessarily get better. I'd like to know what this guy's reasoning for that is. A sense of familiarity began to set in once more. More than ever, it seemed like there was an accepted idea of what Star Wars is and what elements it involves, and too rarely did creators strive to push boundaries or shake up things. Well, part of that, and I guess your statement is true to an extent, but everything was approved through George Lucas because there was a story group. I mean, spoilers, this is common knowledge. When Chewbacca was killed off in Rector Prime, there was a whole chat on who was going to die. There's always an outline. For all the new Jedi Order books, there was an outline for the writers to write, and then they had free reign on everything else, but they had to follow this outline. They submit the draft to Lucasfilm. They either approve it or tell you to write it again. That's just how things worked. And where was I? More than ever, it seemed like there was an accepted idea of what Star Wars is and what elements it involves. And too rarely... Okay, I already read that. How many Star Wars projects have revolved around a Sith Lord stirring up trouble in the galaxy and a Jedi hero emerging to embrace their destiny? It's still fucking happening under the Disney canon. Have you watched Star Wars Rebels? Have you? It's still going on. Goddamn dumbasses. It becomes harder and harder to invest in a conflict like that when you see it repeated numerous times over thousands of years. And granted, there's a little point there, but it was never the same each time. There was always different stakes. I mean, granted, there'd be similar stakes, but it was always different. At least for the most part, it was different each time. But you see, people liked the same. When the Yuuzhan Vong War happened in the New Jedi Order, people got butthurt over it. And so they went back to the same for a lot of it. And Jason Solo's story arc, it's a little cliche, but it's entertaining. People liked the entertaining aspect of it. It didn't matter if it was the same necessarily. People wanted that. That's why people like the same, in fact. Why do you think we have so many fucking remakes in Hollywood? It's because people want the same thing. So, yeah. Why is it that IGN gives Call of Duty like a 9 out of 10 every time a new one comes out when it's the same fucking game? People like the same. So, yeah. It's not just recycled plots that have held the franchise back. There's shockingly little diversity in most Star Wars projects, visually, stylistically, and otherwise. No, there's a lot of difference in things. A lot. We had so many genres of Star Wars stuff. We had horror Star Wars. We had Western Star Wars. We had very hardcore science fiction Star Wars. We had mystical Star Wars. There's just a wide variety. Character-driven Star Wars. Yes, more character-driven than the movies. We've had stories that were very character-driven. There's all sorts of shit, so that falls on its ass. The old Star Wars timeline ranged for a good 25,000 years or so, stretched from the earliest days of the Jedi-Sith conflict to the events of Star Wars Legacy. It's about 37,000 years, actually. And that's widely known. Wouldn't take much to look that shit up. In all those countless centuries, very little about the universe changed. Technology stays the same, the fashion stays the same, the cultures and civilizations stay the same. No, it doesn't. If you read, say, Dawn of the Jedi, where the Jedi, not the Jedi don't even have lightsabers. They have swords. And you compare it to, say, the original trilogy where hyperspace is known. In Dawn of the Jedi, there isn't hyperspace. They haven't discovered it yet. Like in the Tales of the Jedi Golden Age of the Sith, the main characters are hyperspace navigators looking for new inventive ways to go into hyperspace to get to planet as easily as they can, and they get paid for it. So that doesn't make any sense. And that contradicts because, you know, this new Disney canon Why 30 years after the Battle of Endor are they still using fucking X-Wings? In the EU, about, I don't know, 15 years after the Battle of Endor, they had the New Republic wasn't using X-Wings anymore. I mean, granted, they were still using some, but they were phasing them out into E-Wings. I mean, the Empire didn't use TIE fighters after a while. They used drone-based, like, TIE interceptors. The technology changed. Granted, some things stayed the same, and I didn't appreciate it, like how the legacy in Star Wars Legacy, which is like 150 years after Jedi or something like that, the Stormtrooper armor was the same. Their blasters were not, but their armor was the same. There were some similarities between things. I mean, they're still using lightsabers. I mean, granted, lightsabers changed because in the very old Republic, they had them as battery packs. And before then, Dawn of the Jedi, lightsabers didn't exist. They were called Force Sabers, and you'd use your dark side energy to use the Force Saber. So, yeah, and style does change. For instance, the prequel trilogy has more of a medieval or early Renaissance look to it with the dressing, and then the original trilogy has more of kind of a 70s medieval thing going on, like a mix of that. So there's that. There's all sorts of stuff. The cultures and civilizations stay the same. Not entirely true. Some do, yes, but some don't. BioWare's Star Wars The Old Republic, their MMO, is meant to take place thousands of years before the films. But looking at the character and tech designs in the game, it could just as easily be happening 10 minutes before. No, not really. Did you actually pay attention to the game? I mean, some things look similar to other stuff, but you can tell it looks older. Like, stuff has evolved. Like, the armor that, like, the New Republic Army people have looks kind of like the Stormtrooper armor. But you can tell that things evolve. Okay, let's continue this. A lot of this fairly superficial in the end. What's always bothered me most about the expanded universe is the lack of originality when it comes to the way writers and artists execute these stories. Really? Well, let's see if this guy backs that up. There's very much a house style when it comes to writing and drawing and rendering Star Wars. Every once in a while, you encounter a project that dares to be a little different. Yes, a lot of them dare to be different. There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of ways that things are written. Yes, it's Star Wars, but there's different things. I explained. They did a horror. They've done horror stuff with Star Wars. They've done mystical things with Star Wars. It's all written differently. Granted, is it all good? No. I mean, not everything's good. I'm not like, I don't accept everything. If you've watched any of my videos, I've reviewed stuff I didn't like in the Star Wars Expanded Universe. But I've also reviewed stuff that I loved. And everything is written differently for the most part. I mean, granted, Death Troopers and Red Harvest, since they're written by the same author and they're in the same series, they're written similarly. So, yeah. There are some styles that are similar, but others aren't. Michael Stackpole's novel I, Jedi and Matthew Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith experimented with non-first-person storytelling perspectives. Very little. I haven't read any Star Wars stuff that's in the first person that was a novel. Now, granted, Heir to the Jedi is written in first person. that's how it was marketed to be. I have no interest in reading Disney canon shit. But it's there. Most of everything is written in either the third person or some of it's in the second person. Some of the comics, you know, their issues, they're in the first person. But yeah, I don't understand what you're trying to get at. The various Tag and Bink comics took an unusual slapstick comedy approach. They were also not canon, but they're a fun read. Yeah, I'll agree with that. It was very different. I like Tag and Bink. Unfortunately, these stories tend to be outliers among a sea of books, novels, and games that pride themselves on being faithful to the source material as possible. I don't get where you're going at. Yeah, they were faithful to the source material because everything fit in a canon. It all connected. Yes, they had to be, to some degree, they had to go with the source material. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense. And it would contradict itself. You mean like the Disney canon where 3 people can apparently fit in a TIE fighter? Who knew that? You know, when in Star Wars, the original Star Wars, they call it a short-range one-man fighter. Yes, that's movie canon. That's your Disney canon. Contradiction, but we'll get to all that in my wrap-up here. Certainly a healthy respect for the source material is always necessary, but that doesn't mean creators should be afraid to really dig into this universe and shake up fans' expectations. Did you not read the new Jedi Order? You referenced it, but did you actually read some of it? Rather than conforming to the template George Lucas established, creators need to experiment and be bold. Yeah, lots of people experimented with things. George was very open with a lot of stuff. However, it had to fit in the continuity, which is fine. Like I said, they would have an outline, and it would be a very short outline. It was just blah, 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 this needs to happen. So, and then you have free range on how you approached it. I think that's experimenting. Have you not read Death Troopers? People didn't think a Star Wars horror novel would work, and it did. It was an experiment. Okay, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, Star Wars is just a homage to the things Lucas loved as a boy. Flash Gordon serials, Akira Kurosawa's samurai films, the Barsoom novels, etc. Very true. Yes, that's what, much like how Indiana Jones is, it's based off of the adventure serials that Steven Spielberg and Lucas grew up with. Yeah, this is what inspired Star Wars. I'm not going to argue that. That's very true. It's also common knowledge. He took those elements and used them to create something fresh and new that resonated with millions of moviegoers. Yes, the best way to honor that legacy isn't to keep regurgitating the same themes and conflicts, but to continue innovating and publishing the Star Wars universe forward. What the fuck do you think they were doing? What? I keep bringing up the same points over and over again. I don't understand what you didn't get in the Star Wars EU. I don't understand here, man. I don't. Star Wars is bigger than George Lucas now. The time has come for other creators to leave their unique personal stamp on Star Wars. Like Timothy Zahn didn't do that before, or Karen Travis, or James Luceno, or John Jackson Miller, or Kevin J. Anderson. I don't understand. Hopefully we'll see that in the new directors and writers work to expand the franchise on the big screen. I'll get to that point at the end of the video. I don't know about you, but the idea of a Rian Johnson directed Star Wars sequel makes me pretty giddy. That's cool. I don't care. I like the guy's director's choice. I liked Brick. Yeah, he should have directed one of the prequels. But yeah, I'm not really into these new Star Wars sequels. Ideally, these films will inspire a new wave of experimentation and individuality in other Star Wars projects. It hasn't so far, and we'll get to that in the wrap-up. Or right now. We're starting to see this happening already. Star Wars Rebels is doing a great job of blending the elements of Clone Wars and the original trilogy in a very kiddie, boring way that rips off The Force Unleashed. The recent release of Heir to the Jedi novel, the Heir to the Jedi novel follows in iJedi's first-person narration footsteps. So iJedi was first person. I haven't read iJedi, it's on my review list. But I don't have any reason to read Heir to the Jedi, because it's not in the canon I want. Not my thing. If someone gave me a copy, I'd probably read it, but I'm not going to spend my personal money on it. Marvel's new comics feature writers like Jason Aaron and Mark Waid who are able to display clear, unique voice even when working with company-owned characters. No. Okay, Tristan, you get the Star Wars #3 kind of my whole opinion of this right now on a Canon Rants. The Marvel Star Wars series ripped off Splinter of the Mind's Eye and Vader's Quest in 2 issues. None of all this Marvel stuff is original. I mean, granted, they do slightly different things, but its main story, Darth Vader rips off Vader's Quest. Princess Leia, I don't know anything about that, so I can't comment. But the main Star Wars title, it ripped off the climax of Splinter of the Mind's Eye at the beginning of issue 2. So it's not unique. It's a rehash of stuff we've already read. It's just lots of people didn't read this stuff, so it's new to them. It's much like how the New 52 does very similar things. I mean, Superman fought Doomsday. They kind of ripped off Death of Superman there. It's just something the comics industry does. It rehashes crap all the time. Unique voice. Even the random things like the Lego Star Wars shorts are doing their part to inject a little more levity into the franchise. It's early, but it's a start. Yeah, kids like the Lego Star Wars stuff. Okay, I'll be really quick. I think best example of what Disney should be striving for with Star Wars is the Batman franchise. Oh, do tell. There are core elements of Batman that never change his motivations, his basic origin, his rogues gallery, etc. But within that loose framework, there's a lot of room for interpretation and variety. Batman can be grim and brooding, he could be campy and fun, or he could be stylized over the top. What do you think the expanded universe did with Star Wars? If you look for it, you can find it. Over the years, we've seen live-action Batman projects, blah, blah, blah. Basically, this goes into comparing it to Batman, which has got me to the question, so that means it's okay to reboot Star Wars constantly? And I love Batman. I'm a big Batman fan. I'm reading Nightfall right now. I'm really into Batman. I'm really into the older Batman. I like it all. With the exception of the movie Batman and Robin and Kevin Smith's shit on Batman. I like it. So yeah. So let's get to the wrap up here. So I'm shocked. I'm shocked he didn't bring up that, oh, the EU had continuity errors all over the place, like a lot of them do. So I'm glad he didn't bring that up, because I would have shot that down too. So, my final verdict is, this new Disney canon is not original at all. All of their stuff is rehashes of the EU. Hell, they're bringing, I can't remember the actress's name, but she was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She is basically a rip-off character of Mara Jade in Star Wars Rebels. I mean, not only does your new continuity have continuity errors already, and there's barely anything for it, but it's the same shit we read in the EU. Marvel Star Wars ripping off Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Darth Vader ripping off Vader's quest. I don't even know what Princess Leia is doing, but a lot of people aren't liking that, so I don't know what's up with that. So anyway, guys, that's my can rants. Hopefully you sat through the whole thing. You read the whole thing in that article. This is a long one. Have a nice day, people, and some more videos coming out this week.